can certain foods that you're eating be impacting your estrogen levels? We're talking soy, that means tofu, we're talking beer, we're talking flax seeds. Could they be impacting your hormonal health in ways that you're not aware of? Today we're debunking the science around phytoestrogens. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Clementina. I'm doing health and wellness content here on YouTube. I have graduated with a bachelor's degree in nutritional sciences and a master's degree in food chemistry, and today we're debunking the myths about phytoestrogens. We're going to be evaluating the available science and we're going to be addressing if they have some impact on your health and is that impact more positive and more negative. Phytoestrogens have been gaining more popularity, especially with pre- and post-menopausal women, so people that are around the time of the age that their period stops. This is when they experience a lot of negative symptoms like hot flashes or also insomnia and other kinds of symptoms that are related to the hormonal imbalances, and there have been some supplements on the market that contain phytoestrogens and claim that they would improve the symptoms that you're experiencing throughout this period. Also suggest that this could be an alternative to estrogen replacement therapy. Phytoestrogens generally are plant-derived compounds that have a structural similarity to estrogen. The name of estrogen generally is 17-beta-estradiol. This is what the female hormone is called. I'm saying it like this because it's also present, of course, in a male's body and just at different concentrations and in a different relation to testosterone. Men also contain estrogen receptors as well. This similar structure of the phytoestrogens is what makes it able to bind to the estrogen receptors in one's body. They do not bind with the same potency as the estrogen hormone. The different phytoestrogens bind with a different potency, but usually it's a lot lower than for the actual hormone itself. For most of the estrogens, it's 10,000s of times lower than the effectiveness of estrogen, but for some specific compounds and some specific metabolites, this potency could be higher. These impacts of phytoestrogens have already been suggested throughout history, even in the previous century, in Western Australia, where there were some infertility issues concerning sheep that were being raised and that they were grazing these red clover fields. And since red clover is high in phytoestrogen, the researchers suggested that these infertility issues could be related to the high phytoestrogen content in red clover. Similar issues have been observed in zoos since the animals there are primarily being fed soy meal, which is also very high in phytoestrogens. There is also another thing that makes phytoestrogens more popular. This is the so-called Japanese phenomenon that has been gaining more attention in the recent decades, and this accounts for the fact that Japanese women experience a lower rate of certain cancers such as breast cancer compared to Western women. And this effect is also observed in Japanese migrants, so Japanese people that have then moved to the US and have adopted some kind of a Western diet. The breast cancer risks then also increased in these groups. This has been proposed to be due to the higher intake of soy-based foods from an early age. The major groups of phytoestrogens are isoflavones. These are the most popular ones. These are derived from soybeans. Another groups are prenyl flavonoids. These are also very common. These are the compounds that are contained in beer. The remaining groups are lignans that are contained in flax seeds and also coumastanes. The isoflavones are the most popular since they are contained in soy and therefore also in soy-based products such as tofu or tempeh and other fermented products. Japanese people, for instance, they tend to be consuming between 15 and 50 milligrams of isoflavones per day. For the people following the Western diet, this amount is around 2 milligrams per day, so those are tens of times lower. Of course, that amount would be higher in women, for instance, that intake some kinds of supplements containing phytoestrogens. People in the perimenopausal period of their lives intake those supplements, but also there are other kinds of supplements that contain phytoestrogens. There are some supplements, I found this in a study, I didn't even know that this existed, that claimed that the one compound that I mentioned was contained in beer, the 8-prenylnaringenin, N. It's a very complicated name to pronounce. These supplements contain higher amounts of that, and they claim to be effective for breast enlargement, which seemed very suspicious to me why that would work. These supplements would then be intaken from also another group of people, a lot of younger women. This is why it's important to know if phytoestrogens could also be having negative impacts on people's health. The major mode of action of phytoestrogens, as I already mentioned, is that they bind to the estrogen receptors in their body. Not all of the phytoestrogens, but some small proportion of them. As I already mentioned, they're a lot less potent than estrogen. There are multiple kinds of estrogen receptors in a person's body. There is the ER alpha and the ER beta estrogen receptor. The phytoestrogens bind with a different potency to these different receptors. There are also different amounts of these receptors in different tissues. There is more of the ER alpha receptor in a woman's uterus, and the ER beta receptor is more dominant in a man's prostate. The difference between the ER alpha and the ER beta is that ER alpha can actually increase cell proliferation of certain tissues. That is very important, especially for estrogen-dependent tumors and for breast cancer as well. ER beta has the opposite effect, and it can decrease the proliferation of cells. This is why it is very difficult to establish what exactly of an effect would a phytoestrogen have on one's body, depending on which of the two receptors it is more likely to bind. Phytoestrogens have to compete in one's body with the estrogen that is already present. So it is not directly related to the amount of phytoestrogen that you're ingesting to the amount that would actually bind. If you have more estrogen, then the estrogen that you already have is more likely to bind to those receptors than the phytoestrogens that you're ingesting. Genes also seem to be playing a very important role where we're talking about potency, likelihood that the phytoestrogens would be more effective in one's body. This is especially related to one metabolite. It is called equol, and it is generated from one of the phytoestrogens that is called daithine. A lot of people do not possess the ability to generate higher amounts of this metabolite. Only a certain group of people, this is predetermined genetically, are able to generate more of this metabolite. And the thing about equol is that this has a lot of higher potency, and it is a lot more likely, 1,000 times more likely, to bind to the estrogen receptor than the rest of the phytoestrogens and the metabolites. This is why genetics play an important role when we're talking about the impact of those compounds. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the supplements that are available and the claims that have been made. For phytoestrogens containing supplements, their main target group are peri- and postmenopausal women. With perimenopausal women, there is the idea that they're supposed to be reducing the negative symptoms that come with perimenopause. By the way, if I have not explained it, perimenopause can last for years, which is why for these women it is very crucial. If they're experiencing a lot of these negative symptoms, it definitely improves their quality of life if there is something that would improve that symptom. My mother, for example, is exactly in this period of her life right now, and it has been already going on for maybe 3 or 4 years, and they do not seem to be getting less intense. She does not experience hot flashes, but however, insomnia and mood swings are very prevalent in the recent years. These phytoestrogen supplements claim to reduce the frequency of hot flashes, and there have been some studies that actually support these claims. Some of those supplements also claim that they would improve bone density. This has not been really scientifically supported by the studies. The phytoestrogen supplements do not seem to support the retainment of bone density. Maybe you're familiar that with menopause and with the difference in hormones that comes with it, women become a lot more prone to osteoporosis due to the hormonal changes, and also to other diseases such as cardiovascular disease and stroke. That risk rises as well with hormonal changes and the lack of estrogen in one's body. This is why phytoestrogen have also been proposed to modulate the increase in cardiovascular disease. Also with estrogen deficiency generally that comes with menopause comes an increase in obesity, fat distribution, and also generally the amount of lipids in one's blood plasma. Here comes the claim that phytoestrogens can also modulate that and help with the increasement and help with the decrease of those risks. This is mainly because because the benefits that estrogen previously had are being attributed to phytoestrogens. With the science that is now available, it has not been proven that the benefits of estrogen are equivalent to the benefits of phytoestrogens when it comes to cardiovascular disease. A general lower incidence of cardiovascular disease in those age groups is also present in Asian populations, but again, the science done on phytoestrogens and the studies do not support the claims that these supplements on abnormally high soy intake would then improve your body composition, prevent obesity, or in any way decrease the risk of heart disease. Because of the already mentioned Japanese phenomenon talked about with the decreased breast cancer risks, there have also been some propositions that supplements containing higher amounts of phytoestrogens could also reduce breast cancer risk in women and prostate cancer risk in men. The science around this is very controversial, since some of the cancers such as breast cancer, are highly dependent on estrogen and the stimulation of these receptors. In sensitive individuals, a higher intake of phytoestrogens technically lead to the development of breast cancer tumors. Again, I'm talking about sensitive individuals or individuals that already have breast cancer tumors. That remains to be established, what is exactly the connection between phytoestrogen intake and also breast cancer tumors. Just a personal addition to this, my mom has this issue. I'm talking a lot about her in this video because she's in this age and it's very relevant to her, maybe also to your mother if you're around my age. I'm 24, by the way. Phytoestrogens were something that she was told to exclude from her diet because she has some of these called myomas. These are fibroids in your uterus. They could also be outside of your uterus, in the uterine wall or uterine cavity. These are fibroids made up mostly of muscle tissue that tends to get larger with time if there have not been some kind of modifications in the diet or the supplement intake that is made. This and her gynecologist told her to not take any phytoestrogen supplements, so because these tumors would then tend to grow according to him if they were being, let's say, fed more phytoestrogens. Their growth would have been stimulated, which in time, if they get even bigger, they would have to be surgically removed. She also excluded tofu and some other specific foods high in phytoestrogens from her diet, which in this age is actually at the same time something that a lot of women would not want to do, since they have no way to mediate their perimenopausal symptoms. On the topic of the uterus, estrogen, not phytoestrogens, estrogen in general, has been related to an increased risk of uterus cancer. There has not been any scientific evidence that supports the thesis that a higher intake of phytoestrogens would also lead to an increased uterus cancer. You already understand the logic behind this because they would also bind to the estrogen receptors. However, there has not been enough science to really establish that. It has only been concluded by the European Food Safety Association that there is no connection found until now between any kind of uterus complications, like some other kinds of diseases, or generally any abnormal formations in the uterus, and a higher intake of phytoestrogens. But there has not been enough science specifically on phytoestrogen intake and the uterus cancer risks, not just any other kinds of complications relating the uterus. This kind of research is to be now done. It would really be beneficial for women's health if the exact relationship would be established and more light would be really focused on phytoestrogens, different types of phytoestrogens, how do they influence different tissues in women. I feel like the research on this is really lacking, and I know it's been a recurrent topic in women's health that there is really not enough focus on that, and the women's body is still kind of a mystery in 2025, which is actually really sad. And I hope that science really tends to move in this direction in the future, that we gain a better understanding of women's health. There are also some claims that phytoestrogens could also positively influence other parts of other negative symptoms that come with onset of menopause. There have been claims that the phytoestrogens could improve one's cognitive abilities and mediate neurological aging as well. This is because estrogen, its release is controlled by the brain, and the brain also, of course, responds to different estrogen levels. Estradiol plays plays, estrogen I mean, a key role in the neurology of aging as well. However, this claim have also been kind of controversial for estrogen therapy and for phytoestrogens. Out of the 12 trials that this systematic review examined, only in 6 of them there were some beneficial effects found. There was no supportive data of any positive effects of phytoestrogens and cognitive function. This is why to really make a definite conclusion right now is impossible, and further research needs to be done. The researchers also suggest that this all could also be related again to the different capacity of people to produce equal and genetic polymorphisms and differences between individuals. On a final note, this question remains unresolved. If phytoestrogens are beneficial or harmful to human health is still of very high importance, but no definite conclusion can be made on the topic. I forgot to mention this could be related to the presence or absence of a specific gut bacteria as well. It has not been clarified which, but it's just been kind of proposed that gut microflora could also be having an impact on the metabolism of the phytoestrogens. It needs also to be established if soy-based infant foods could have an impact of the development then of the baby and in the production of hormones then later on in the life of the child. More research also needs to be done on the genetic polymorphisms and people's different abilities to produce different metabolites, especially equal. What also needs to be investigated is how phytoestrogens act in the presence of more or less estrogen in one's body. They need to compete with each other to bind to the estrogen receptors, and the effects would be different in the presence of different concentrations of estrogen in one's body. If there is more estrogen, the phytoestrogens is not clear what kind of impact they would have. If there are lower concentrations of estrogen in one's body, then the effects of phytoestrogens would logically be pro-estrogenic because they would then have a higher chance of binding to the receptors. The evidence from all of these studies does not make it so obvious that the beneficial effects of phytoestrogens outweigh any potential negative effects related to breast cancer risks, the growth of different estrogen-dependent tumors, and also uterine cancer. Normal dietary intake of phytoestrogens, according to the institutions, the European Food Safety Association, for instance, is generally regarded as safe. Of higher concern is the intake of estrogen-based supplement, of phytoestrogen-containing supplements, but since there has also been really a growing conversation about women's health, and I've been seeing some people claiming that intake of soy or also other foods could be in some way helping you balance out your hormones and so on. I believe that because since the science behind estrogens does not provide any clear statements, young people should most likely abstain from intaking, and this is also what the researchers concluded. Young people should really stay away from such supplements with higher concentrations of phytoestrogens that could not be normally ingested with foods. Again, normal food intake should be fine. For perimenopausal women, I believe the question is really a lot more complicated, and most should really consult with their gynecologist, especially if they have some kinds of other conditions or myomas, such as the case with my own mother, which could really influence the decision behind are you able to take those supplements to relieve your symptoms, or are you not able to take those supplements? Also, I was listening one time long ago to a podcast and which claimed that based on research, also the addition of such supplements or generally of estrogen therapy to your routine really could be a lot more beneficial if you start at a specific time. That if you started too late, it would not have the same positive impact as if you started it in the premenopausal range compared to starting it when you're already in menopause. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you learned something new today. Let me know down in the comments if you want me to discuss something specific in the future. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you next time.